There are ghost towns that disappear because people lose interest, because work runs out, because roads change. And then there are places like Picher, places that don't just fade away. They are forced to disappear for their own safety, for survival, because staying is no longer living. It's gambling with your life. Picher, Oklahoma, was once a proud mining town, a place built on hard work, metal, industry, and American determination. It gave the country what it needed: lead, zinc, the materials that helped build and power the United States through wars, factories, and progress. For decades, the ground beneath Picher was full of wealth. But no one realized it was also full of danger. Silent danger, invisible danger, a danger that would stay long after the money was gone, a danger that would poison land, poison water, poison air, poison people, and eventually turn Picher into one of the most dangerous places in America. Today, when you go there, you don't feel normal abandonment. You don't just see empty streets and broken houses. You feel something heavier, like a warning, like a place that still remembers pain, like a town that didn't simply die. It was abandoned for survival, not because people wanted to leave, but because staying meant slowly getting sick, watching children suffer, breathing in death disguised as dust. This is the story of a town that gave everything it had until it had nothing safe left to give. The story of hope, industry, denial, tragedy, and a community forced to walk away from their homes, their streets, their schools, their memories, because the place they loved had become too toxic to live in. This is the story of Picher, a town America built, a town America used, a town America left behind. Before Picher became a warning, it was a promise. In the early 1900s, the land under northeastern Oklahoma hid something incredibly valuable. Deep beneath the soil lay powerful mineral wealth, lead and zinc, metals that would fuel America's growth, its industries, and its wars. When the first veins were discovered, everything changed. Drills went into the ground. Mines opened. Machinery roared to life. And suddenly, this quiet land became one of the busiest mining regions in the United States. People rushed there. Workers, families, opportunity seekers. They came because Picher offered what so many American towns promised in that era: work, stability, a future. The town exploded with life. Houses went up quickly. Stores opened. Schools were built. Church bells rang on Sundays. Kids played in the streets while their parents worked underground, pulling metal from the earth. The tri-state mining district, which included Picher, became one of the most productive mining regions in American history. Lead and zinc from this ground helped win wars, build cities, power industries, and support everything from ammunition to manufacturing. Picher was proud of that. This wasn't a lazy town. This was a town where people worked long days, came home exhausted, yet felt proud knowing their effort mattered. Coal, dust on clothes, metal scent in the air, machines never fully silent. Life built around the rhythm of the mines. And Picher grew because of it. By the mid-1900s, thousands of people lived here. Shops were busy. Schools were full. Downtown streets were alive. Community events, parades, celebrations. It felt like a strong, active American town on the rise. People believed in Picher. They believed in the ground beneath their feet. They believed this place would last forever. But mining towns rarely tell the full truth while they're alive. They show jobs, but not the slow cost. They show wealth, but not the debt beneath it. They show growth, but not the cracks forming underneath. Because mining doesn't just take what it needs, it changes what it leaves behind. Under Picher, the ground was being hollowed out. Huge underground tunnels, massive mining caverns, land quietly weakening. And above ground, mountains of waste rock were piling up. Huge artificial hills known as chat piles, leftovers from the mining process. To people back then, they weren't danger. They were simply part of the landscape. Kids climbed them for fun. People drove ATVs on them. They stood like white-gray mountains around the town, blending into everyday life. Nobody felt afraid. Why would they? The mines were successful. People were working. The town was thriving. But inside those piles were toxins. Inside the soil was poison. Inside the air were things no one could yet see. And as mining continued, something even worse was happening. The land beneath Picher wasn't just damaged. It was becoming unstable. But while money was flowing, while business was good, no one wanted to look too closely. It's easy to celebrate success. Much harder to ask the dangerous question, what will this do to us later? For decades, the answer was ignored. And while Picher stood proud, its future was quietly being destroyed from the inside out. Soon, the price of progress would reveal itself. Not in theory, not in statistics, but in people, in health, in children, in families, in the very ground they stood on. The town that once helped build America would discover what America had accidentally built beneath it. Not protection, not strength, but disaster. Some disasters explode. They happen in a single moment. A storm, en explosion, a fire, a collapse. Everyone sees them. Everyone understands them instantly. But Picher's disaster wasn't like that. Picher's disaster was silent. It didn't come crashing in one violent moment. It crept in slowly, day by day, breath by breath, sip by sip, generation by generation. And no one knew until it was already inside them. For decades, mining created mountains of chat, huge piles of crushed rock and toxic waste left behind from the processing of lead and zinc. They surrounded the town like strange artificial hills. People didn't see danger. They saw playgrounds. Kids ran up and down those piles. They slid down them in winter. They rolled down them for fun. They breathed the dust. They swallowed it accidentally. They took it home on their shoes and clothes. Parents didn't stop them. Why would they? This was their town, their world, their normal. But inside that dust was lead. And lead is not just dangerous. It is devastating. It attacks the body quietly. It damages the brain. It harms nervous systems. It affects development. And the smallest, most innocent bodies suffer the most. Children. Meanwhile, the mines dug deep underground. Tunnels, caverns, hollow spaces beneath the city. And when mining stopped, those empty spaces did not go away. The ground weakened. The land shifted. Sinkholes appeared. Foundations cracked. Houses tilted. The earth beneath Picher was literally collapsing. Then came the water. Groundwater began to fill abandoned mines. Water that passed through toxic rock. Water that soaked through decades of mining waste. It turned acidic. It turned contaminated. It turned poisonous. It carried heavy metals into streams, into soil, into places people lived. And slowly, the truth began to surface. Children started getting sick. Doctors noticed patterns. Tests revealed something horrifying. In some parts of Picher, more than a third of the town's children had dangerously high levels of lead in their blood, not slightly above normal, catastrophically high, levels that could damage thinking, learning, behavior, emotion, their futures. Parents who had once watched their kids play on the chat piles now saw them as something else. Not hills, threats. Homes were built on contaminated earth. Yards were full of poisonous dust. Playgrounds were dangerous. Schoolyards weren't safe. The very air could harm you. And the worst part? This wasn't a sudden surprise. It was the result of years of denial, of ignoring problems, of believing money and industry mattered more than environmental truth. The land beneath Picher wasn't just unhealthy. It had become unlivable. Experts came in. Studies were done. The results were beyond alarming. The conclusion was unavoidable. Picher was not just a struggling town. Picher was a place where staying meant risking your health, your children's health, your future. A place where water, soil, dust, and ground itself had turned against the people who lived there. The enemy wasn't an army. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't a disease brought from somewhere else. The enemy was built into the town's foundation, created by human hands, accepted for decades, ignored until the truth became impossible to deny. What happens to a town when the place you call home is slowly killing the people you love? For Picher, the answer would come soon, and it wouldn't come gently. It would come with fear, with heartbreak, with decisions no family should ever have to make. Stay in the place you love, or leave everything behind to survive. There are few things more heartbreaking for a community than being told you cannot safely live here anymore. Not because of war, not because of a hurricane or a fire or a sudden disaster, but because the ground you stand on, the air you breathe, the dust on your streets, and the water beneath your feet have become too dangerous to survive. That was the reality for Picher. By the early 2000s, the truth could no longer be softened, hidden, or ignored. The environmental damage was catastrophic. The land was unstable. The mines beneath the town sagged and shifted. The chat piles poisoned soil and air. Children's blood tests revealed alarming lead levels. Government agencies stepped in. Scientists wrote reports. Inspectors issued warnings. And eventually, the message became clear. Picher was not just unhealthy. Picher was a public health emergency. The United States government declared the area part of a massive environmental disaster zone. A federal buyout program began. Homes were evaluated. Families were offered money to leave. Entire neighborhoods were marked for demolition. Imagine what that feels like, to sit at your kitchen table, in the home you raise your children in, the home filled with memories, photos, laughter, arguments, birthdays. And here, it's not safe to live here anymore. You need to go. This place is killing you. Some people cried. Some were angry. Some refused to believe it. This was their town, their identity, their history. They didn't feel sick. They didn't feel poisoned. They had lived here their entire lives. How do you suddenly walk away from that? But other families looked at their children, looked at medical results, looked at the slow, quiet harm, and they knew staying wasn't strength. Staying was risk. So house by house, street by street, family by family, Picher began to empty. People packed their lives into boxes. They took what they could. They left behind what they couldn't. Some said goodbye to neighbors they had known since childhood. Some didn't even get to say goodbye at all. One day a house was full of life. The next day, it was silent. Windows dark, doors locked, yards empty, stores closed. Schools eventually shut down. Streets that once carried bikes, school buses, and daily routine now carried nothing. There's a very specific kind of sadness that lives in towns like this. Not the sadness of failure, not the sadness of boredom, but the sadness of being forced to let go, forced to leave your history behind, forced to abandon not just a building, but a life. Some residents held on as long as they could. Some stayed longer than anyone expected. Some hoped something would change. But change didn't come. One of the final blows to the soul of this town came not from poison, but from tragedy. In 2008, a deadly tornado struck Picher. Already weakened, already half empty, already emotionally fragile. The town was hit again. Homes were destroyed. Lives were lost. Hope was shattered. For many, that moment ended the fight. What little reason to stay remained was gone. The buyouts continued. More families left. Streetlights stood over nobody. Homes were demolished. Foundations were ripped from the earth. Until eventually, Picher wasn't a living town anymore. It was an evacuation zone. A memory. A place where people once lived, but now we're told they simply couldn't. A town too toxic to exist as a town. A town officially abandoned. Today, when you go to Picher, you don't find a town. You find the absence of one. Most buildings are gone. Foundations have been torn out. Homes have been demolished. Streets that once carried school buses, workers, families, and daily life now lead nowhere. Nature is slowly covering what remains. Grass grows where living rooms used to be. Wind moves freely through places that once held voices, laughter, arguments, and dreams. Silence has replaced everything. There are still signs, though, not signs of life, signs of warning, environmental markers, government notices, reminders that this land is not just empty, it is dangerous. And yet, there is something else here too. Memory. Because a town is not only buildings and roads. A town is people. A town is childhoods. A town is families, relationships, routines, and moments that matter deeply to someone. And even if the physical place is gone, those memories remain. People who once lived in Picher still remember what it was like when the town was alive. They remember playing outside. They remember school days. They remember neighbors. They remember a time when Picher felt like a normal place, before the truth became undeniable. For them, Picher is not just the most toxic town in America. It was home, and that makes this story even more human. Because Picher wasn't destroyed by one villain. It wasn't wiped out by one dramatic event. It was lost slowly because warnings weren't taken seriously soon enough. Because consequences of industry were ignored. Because short-term progress overshadowed long-term reality. Picher is not just a tragedy. It is a lesson about responsibility. A lesson about what happens when a community gives everything to industry, but industry never gives enough back to protect it. A lesson about children paying the price for decisions made long before they were born. It is also a reminder that progress always has a cost. Sometimes that cost is visible. Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it takes years to reveal itself. And when it finally does, it can be too late. Today, Picher stands as one of the strongest environmental warnings in American history. A place that says, pay attention, ask questions, protect your communities. Do not ignore danger simply because profit feels more important in the moment. Because land remembers, soil remembers, water remembers, and eventually, people are forced to remember too. When you stand in what's left of Picher, you don't just see what was lost. You feel the weight of what could have been prevented. You feel the fragility of towns, of communities, of lives that depend on the land beneath their feet being safe. Picher did not fail because its people were weak. Picher died because it was poisoned, and the people, had no choice but to leave. Today, the wind moves across the empty ground. The sky stretches endlessly overhead. Silence rests where life once was, and Picher remains, not as a thriving town, but as a warning carved into the American landscape. A reminder that some places disappear not because time forgets them, but because they become too dangerous to survive. This is the story of Picher, a town that helped build America, a town that was sacrificed in the name of progress, a town that now exists only in memory and in the hope that no other place will ever have to share its fate.